He learns to move before he learns to stay. Taiwan to Thailand, to a cafeteria that smells like pencil shavings and dish soap. Later, a Denny's booth will hold a napkin with a sketch that outlives the napkin. A new word will cross the room, GPU, and the room will get larger. Tonight, he isn't a valuation, a jacket, or a stage. He is a person who keeps returning to the heavy part of the problem and lifting there, quietly, until it moves. This is Jensen Huang, co-founder and longtime CEO of NVIDIA. Lights low, the story walks. He is born in winter light in Taipei, in a hallway where footsteps echo in a clean, dependable rhythm. His mother writes dates in a small notebook with tidy numbers and a neat underline. His father tucks a pencil behind his ear, the way some people wear a watch, useful, habitual, a personal metronome. There is a tone in the home that is not strict so much as steady. If an object has a place, let it return to it. If a number is written, let it be correct. If you borrow a tool, you leave it better than you found it. He does not think of this as discipline. He experiences it as kindness toward tomorrow. A move to Tainan gives him two new teachers, streets and steam. The streets show him that pattern lives underneath noise. Morning scooters, shutters rolling up, vendors arranging bowls in the same order every day. Steam shows him patience. Water waits at 99 degrees and then decides, all at once, to become something else. He learns to notice the moments before, the quiet before boiling, the breath before a bell, the look on a teacher's face just before a hard idea. He will keep this habit. Watch the seconds that come right before an event. Later, when the company grows large and the world stares, this habit will keep him from being surprised by things that were announcing themselves in small ways. Work moves the family to Thailand. He is young, and the air is warm, and everything seems to hum. An international school becomes his experiment, with translation as a sport. Consonants sit in his mouth like marbles, until he learns where to place them against his teeth. Vowels stretch or tighten depending on who is listening. He discovers the difference between saying the right word and landing in the right place with a word. He notices that teachers pause differently in English than in Mandarin. They round off an idea with a small smile to give permission for questions. He collects these small details the way other kids collect trading cards. He is not trying to be impressive. He is trying to be accurate with people. Then, America. A small town that smells like sawdust and cafeteria pizza. The bus exhales at the curb. He learns to open a locker that sticks by shifting his weight just so. Hip first, then twist, then pull. A custodian shows him the trick with no lecture attached. He files that away. Sometimes the solution is not in the manual. It's in the muscle memory of the person who sees the problem every day. He will look for those people later, the ones who carry a company in their fingers. The library becomes a refuge. Fluorescent light, carpet that muffles footsteps. A librarian who respects quiet the way a forest respects shade. He understands that attention is something you can build like a muscle. He chooses seats where the window view is boring. He notices that if he reads a chapter twice, he does not just remember facts. He remembers the shape of the paragraphs, the rhythm of the explanations. Shape and rhythm will matter when he has to explain a platform to millions of people, hardware, software, and a path for ordinary developers to use both. He is learning, without the vocabulary, how to be a teacher. Math arrives as an honest friend. It doesn't audition him. It doesn't care about his accent. If he shows up, it shows up. He learns a personal classification system for problems. Warm problems invite you in and let you play. Cold problems tell you the truth quickly and don't bend. He prefers the cold ones. If he is wrong, he wants to know fast. If he is right, he doesn't need the trumpet. He needs the next piece. In shop class and labs, he meets circuits. Small, stubborn, exact. The smell of solder becomes a kind of comfort, He understands that an error on a board is not a character flaw, it is a place. You can find the place. You can fix the place. A resistor is not a bit player, it can save a chip from a bad hour. A capacitor does not brag, but it can steady a heartbeat of voltage. He learns to love uncelebrated components. Later, he will love uncelebrated jobs in a company, documentation, test harnesses, firmware notes that prevent someone else's night from being ruined. He discovers a private joy that will define his work, flow by construction. Other people chase flow as a mood. He treats it as a plan. Show up, sit down, begin. He designs days like circuits, inputs, coffee, notebook, a block of time with the phone silenced. Outputs, a finished thing, a clarified thing, or a thing that failed in a documented way so tomorrow is not spent relearning the same lesson. He has not yet invented a platform, but he is already building one inside himself. Small habits that make other habits easier. High school moves behind him with the sound of closing lockers. Oregon State University becomes a campus of rain-stitched brick and patient professors. He carries a spiral notebook with 2 columns, answers in one, paths in the other. The answer is for the grade. The path is for the future. The path column teaches him to teach himself again tomorrow after sleep has moved the furniture in his head. He begins to notice that clever solutions feel like fireworks, bright, loud, and gone, while useful solutions feel like lumber, plain, stackable, ready to become a structure. He starts choosing useful on purpose, useful compounds. Group projects introduce a second education. He watches how teams lose days to indecision and then hide the loss under cheerful talk. He watches how one clear note, the summary written the same day, can save a week. He volunteers for the summary more often than not. Not because he loves writing, but because he hates waste. He learns the sentence that will become a tool for life. Here's the next 3-hour task that moves us. Executives will respond to this sentence later. Engineers will respond to it too. It calms rooms. He takes a campus job fixing small things that somebody else has decided do not deserve a meeting. A loose chair leg. A lab PC that crashes because a driver is old. A label that keeps peeling off the drawer where the multimeters live. He notices something that will echo through his company decades later. Problems grow in unowned spaces. When work falls between teams, the work is in trouble. He becomes the kind of person who quietly bends down and picks up the dropped thing. Not because it's heroic, because it's faster than the meeting that would argue about the boundary. Internships and early roles in industry walk him into rooms where the clock does not apologize. Schedules have edges. Mask sets cost real money. A bug in late silicon is a lesson that does not forget your name. He learns to write memos that give a decision-maker only what helps them decide. He can summarize a technical swamp without hiding the crocodiles. He can say, "We can ship by Friday if we accept this trade-off," and mean it. He learns to bring options, not drama. He discovers the difference between throughput and theater. Throughput is boring and real. How many good things you move from almost to shipped each week? Theater is noisy and costs calories. How many impressive sentences you say about a thing that does not yet help anyone outside the building. He is not allergic to story, but he wants the story to be true in the way a tool is true. It works when a tired person needs it. Colleagues teach him 5 unglamorous practices that become part of his spine. Arrive early to the red flag list. The first person to write the risks earns the right to frame them. Answer the second email as fast as the first. That is how trust is built with developers. Fix the documentation before fixing the demo. The demo is 1 night. The doc is a map for 100 nights. Honor the test bench. If a board misbehaves only when the room is cold, then the room being cold is part of the spec. Close loops. Say you'll do a thing, then mark it done, and tell the people who are holding their breath. He learns to see supply chains like rivers and to see bottlenecks like narrow banks. He learns that a platform is not a product you ship, it is a place you maintain. You invite others to stand there, build there, and store their confidence there. If the floor sags, they remember forever. If the floor feels stronger after a storm, they remember longer. He returns to school for a master's degree to sit closer to people who think like mountains and move like weather. Stanford gives him proximity to long-view professors and classmates who turn questions over like stones. In seminar rooms, he hears the same music that played in the back of his head since Thailand. Parallel work. Not one fast mind, but many simple, accurate hands. He cannot yet name the architecture he will help popularize. He can feel its pressure, the way a door feels when a crowd leans on the other side. He studies not only chips, but people around chips, the developers who will need libraries, the researchers who will need a path that does not demand heroics, the technicians who will need a diagram that prevents a 2 a.m. mistake. He decides that if he ever leads something, he will treat the second shift email like a VIP. There is quiet power in answering a lab at midnight. He practices translation between altitudes, high altitude. What is the narrowest definition of success? Ground level. What can we do in the next 3 hours to move toward it? He alternates until rooms stop arguing. He begins to look like a person who can explain. The industry has plenty of people who can design. It rewards the ones who can design and explain. The jacket that he will later be known for is not yet a thing. The habit is the thing. Show up, explain, ship, repeat. He watches managers who dominate rooms with volume. He files them under temporary. He watches managers who lower the temperature and raise the clarity. He files them under permanent. He chooses permanent. On buses, in lines, walking between buildings, he returns to the same question. What if a chip were treated not as a painter with a brush, but as a warehouse of hands? Each hand simple, each hand accurate, all working at once. He imagines weather models, proteins, money matrices, jobs that do not care about texture or light, jobs that care about finishing large piles of small math without complaint. The idea does not feel like thunder. It feels like a tuning fork. He puts it down. It keeps ringing. He builds a personal stack: hardware curiosity, software respect, developer empathy, and a bias toward tools that lower blood pressure. He suspects that if you combine those pieces, you get more than chips. You get a place where other people can work without burning out. He does not yet know the name. He knows the posture. He keeps a notebook he calls Tomorrow's Relief. Each page has 2 columns. Left, someone else's pain, described plainly. Docs assume too much. Driver install brakes on old OS. No example for this pattern. Console messages feel sarcastic. Right. One small step he could take in a week to reduce that pain. He is not a saint. He is a practical engineer. He believes in reducing unnecessary suffering in the workflow because it increases throughput. The notebook makes him walk into other people's corners of the building more often. He meets the quiet experts, the late-night lab tech who knows which connector is cursed, the admin who knows which courier never misses, the student who knows which compiler warning is lying. He learns to listen down and across, not only up. He tests a personal rule that will later show up in launch keynotes as an undertone. Do the boring parts beautifully. People praise the glossy part of a product, but the reason a platform earns memory is because the unglamorous parts are dependable. The driver installer that does not scare you, the error message that admits what it does not know and points you toward a fix, the diagram that looks like it took an afternoon but saves a month. He begins to treat boring as a design space where mastery hides. He watches his peers seek clever roles. He does not resent them. He simply keeps walking toward central roles by serving the unowned spaces, the gaps between teams where the risk of drop is high and the reward is invisible until something fails. He becomes someone people add to email threads because problems seem to get smaller after he replies. He does not think of himself as a future CEO. He thinks of himself as a person who keeps the temperature of rooms in the productive range. He keeps failing usefully and writing down why it failed usefully. He keeps choosing useful over clever, because useful builds platforms and clever builds moments. Some nights he drives in silence and lets the road talk. The same picture forms behind his eyes: a table in a diner, a napkin, 3 names, a plan that will respect parallel work, serve developers like neighbors, and teach a chip to accept a language ordinary people can use. He can see the outline of the booth. He can hear the clink of a coffee cup against a saucer. He does not call this fate. He calls it readiness. A small principle arranges itself at the bottom of a page. Be early to the hard thing and stay late. He underlines it once, then twice. If he ever starts something, that will be the rule. Do not leave after the first trophy. Open the first lane of the bridge, then add the railings. Paint the lines, walk across with the first traveler, and make sure their shoes don't get wet. He does not imagine headlines. He imagines relief, the relief that appears on a developer's face when the tool works exactly when time is shortest. He is not trying to be legendary. He is trying to be reliable, at scale. He wants to be the person a complicated thing can lean on without apology. He knows that if you keep solving the part of the problem that hurts the most, people will carry you forward, because carrying you is lighter than carrying the pain. By the time the degree is done and the next badge is laminated, the picture in his head has stopped being abstract. It is particular. There are names. There is a city. There is a chain restaurant that welcomes engineers at unhelpful hours and keeps pouring coffee like time. He does not believe in omens. He believes in meeting places. The boy who moves has become a man who arrives early to class, early to red flags, early to the quiet work, early to the idea that a chip could be more than a painter. He folds the last page of the notebook, drops a pencil into his bag, and straightens a chair that is not his. He steps outside into air that smells like rain on hot pavement, and there's nothing dramatic about it. It is just time. Next, he will need 2 friends, a booth, and a napkin that holds a company long enough for the company to hold the world. The diner keeps hours that do not flatter anyone, coffee that tastes like staying power, lights that bleach the night off your face, a waitress who calls everyone honey with a credibility that comes from repetition, not performance. The vinyl booth remembers other jackets, other notebooks, other small beginnings. Tonight it is holding 3 engineers who have already done a full day elsewhere and have decided the day is not over until they make a shape out of a conversation. Their names are familiar now, but here they are just people leaning in so the background music won't step on the nouns. Jensen Huang sits with his notebook open and the pencil he has used for years, good wood, clean point. Chris Malachowski traces the arc of an idea with a finger on the laminate, a habit he will never be able to break. Curtis Priam keeps a napkin under his coffee cup and a second napkin clean for diagrams, because one napkin must be allowed to become messy and one napkin must be allowed to become history. They talk about graphics, but the conversation keeps hopping the fence into larger fields: weather, molecules, money matrices, video, vision, any problem where the work looks like a great many small, similar calculations that cannot afford to trip over each other. They do not pretend that pictures are trivial. Pictures are a demanding boss. Pictures teach you to respect time. But pictures might also be the door. If you can pay the rent by making games breathe and pixels arrive on schedule, then you can build a house big enough to invite other workloads inside. The first question is not poetry. It is architecture. What if the chip is built from the ground up to do parallel work without apology? Thousands of simple hands instead of one very fancy one. What if you pair that with software that lets ordinary developers talk to those hands without learning a secret priestly language? What if you ship not only silicon and drivers, but a path, examples, docs, kits, human answers to human emails, so nobody has to perform a hero's journey just to draw a triangle or solve a matrix? They speak in the comfort of the concrete: die area, yield, tool chains, driver models, memory bandwidth. They name enemies carefully. The first enemy is wait time. The second enemy is developer fatigue. Every choice in the young company will be judged by whether it makes wait time shorter and developer fatigue lighter. The waitress drops 3 waters with a casual accuracy that looks like grace. On Jensen's page, 2 columns appear, what the chip must be and what the company must be. He underlines both because chips fail alone and companies fail together. There is a question about timing, not just clocks, but era. Are they early enough to matter and late enough to survive? Early to the hard thing is noble until rent is due. The safe move is a niche. Make an add-on board for a tidy little corner and grow politely. But polite growth has a way of teaching you the wrong lessons. If the vision is parallel work for everything from frames to fluids, they must say so in the design and the docs and the way they show up for the second email at 2 a.m. The napkin diagram earns a second napkin. Names are promises. They do not want a name that sounds like a stunt. They want a name that can age, a word you can say in a lab at midnight without feeling silly, something that can sit under a roadmap that will still be unfolding when the current operating systems are recited in museums. They circle candidates and cross them out. They land on one that sounds like sight, joined to intent. They test it against ordinary phrases. File a driver bug with Akpo. Order a dev kit from Hortco. I need the new board from Parco by Friday. The word holds. The waitress, unaware, refills belief. Jensen sketches the first principles, simple, almost boring sentences that will be repeated for decades without losing their edge. Be early to the hard thing and stay late. Ship, then learn, then ship again. Teach the chip a language people already know. Answer the second email as quickly as the first. Treat documentation like hardware. It can break the project if it's weak. The diner gives them permission to make unfashionable decisions. They will care about things that do not trend, the installer that does not frighten, the sample code that compiles on the machine everyone forgot to upgrade, the error message that points to a fix instead of a forum thread from last year. They agree that boring excellence will be their moat. Shiny is copyable in a month. Boring excellence takes a culture. There is also the old problem of money, which is just time that other people lend you. They will need it. But they refuse to let money choose the product. The product must be jealous of anything that dilutes it. They are not building a feature to raise a round. They are raising a round to build the platform. The distinction seems pious in a diner. It will be tested in offices with glass walls and calendars that blink red. The next morning, the world still looks the same, which is how the world treats beginnings. But their calendar has a new date that does not care how they feel about it. Forms to file, articles to draft, rooms to visit, where a dozen companies claim the future like a plot of land. They clean a corner of a rented office until it smells like cardboard and intention. There are too few chairs. There is a printer that believes it is an employee. There are whiteboards with lines that look like possibility under construction. They choose an organizing habit and place it in the center of the room, the red flag list. Risks are not shameful. Risks are maps. The list is updated daily. It is on the wall where the coffee is. You cannot avoid it without avoiding coffee. At the bottom of the list is a sentence that will survive 3 decades. Who owns this for 72 hours? Ownership is measured in time, not in org chart lines. The person with the ball is the person with 3 days of authority to move the ball. When the ball returns, it returns with notes someone else can read. The earliest hires are chosen for temperament as much as skill. Can you lower the temperature of a room while raising the clarity of a plan? Can you teach without showing off? Can you be precise without picking fights with commas? Interviews include a ritual that becomes lore, the 2 explanations test. First, explain a complex idea to a tired developer in 3 sentences. Second, explain the same idea to a friendly vice president in 3 sentences. If the two explanations do not share a backbone, the candidate is not ready to build a platform. The company is not hunting brilliance only. It is hunting transfer, the ability to move ideas between altitudes without turning them into fog. They assemble a dev kit with the attitude of a host preparing a guest room. The board is fast enough, the drivers are honest, the samples are not theatrical, they are useful on Tuesday. The README is tested by someone who has not slept enough. If the README survives, it goes in the box. If not, they fix the README, not the tester. Alongside the kit is a small card with two addresses, Support Geek and Doxum. The second address matters. If you make it easy to complain about documentation, you will learn in weeks what would otherwise take a year of awkward silence and churn. Naming the chip is another tiny ceremony. There is a superstition here they never admit out loud. A good name should be pronounceable by someone breathing hard after a long day. The early boards get names that sound like motion rather than mythology. The message is not, worship this, but plug this in, see what happens. Product pages avoid heroic metaphors and stick to latency, bandwidth, fill rates, formats. The marketing voice is polite to engineers because engineers are the only people who can feed you for 30 years without getting bored. First customers arrive in 3 species. There are the hopefuls who want a miracle and will forgive anything as long as the demo sings on stage. There are the skeptics who want to see your kit perform under the fluorescent cruelty of their own lab. And there are the quiet professionals who do not attend launch parties, but who will buy everything you can ship if you save them 8 minutes an hour. Forever. The company learns to love the quiet professionals because they are the backbone of a platform. They complain in complete sentences and praise in purchase orders. The first failure arrives on a day when optimism could have used a win. A driver dies in a way that feels personal. The post-mortem is not a search for a culprit. It is a search for a sentence that will prevent the same obituary next month. They update the red flag list. They improve the harness. They change one line in the README that saves someone else 12 hours. The team stands up straighter the next morning because the failure converted to structure. That conversion is a sacred act here. Support is not a department. It is an ethic. The person who wrote the code should taste the email about the code, not as punishment, as nutrition. Developers can smell when an answer is warmed over. The company's early reputation is built on the feeling that a human is on the other end, who knows the path from doesn't work to already shipped. Jensen repeats a line until everyone can say it in their sleep. Fast is nice. Reliable is love. They aim to be loved. They attend conferences with a modest booth and unembarrassed goals. Measure success in conversations with pain. How many people walked away with a smaller problem than they brought? How many promised to send code by Friday because, for the first time, Friday sounds possible? Jensen speaks softly on purpose. He is not underselling. He is honoring engineering's allergy to confetti. He describes the roadmap like a well-lit corridor. No fog machines, no dangerous stairs. Inside the company, a ritual forms. Friday at 4, someone reads the week's second email of the week. The second email is always a harder test than the first. The novelty and courtesy are gone, and now you learn if your habit is real. They celebrate responses that lower blood pressure. A developer in a distant time zone writes back, "Thanks, I can sleep now." There are better awards than plaques. The first board spin is both a party and a drill. When the boxes arrive, people stand around with knives that have cut hundreds of boxes before. They treat each anti-static bag like a sleeping child. Boards power up, some don't. The room divides into silence, murmurs, measured laughter. When a board breathes on the first try, the cheer sounds like relief wearing a jacket. When a board needs coaxing, a stool is dragged over and coaxing begins. The point is not to be lucky, the point is to be ready for whatever luck arrives. they start to collect use cases that do not fit in a slide, but do fit in a life. A small studio uses the kit to finish a scene on time and pays rent. A university lab sees a simulation finish before dawn and decides to take a weekend off for the first time in a semester. A kid who had never written to a company before writes to say a sample program taught him more about memory than a textbook did. The inbox becomes a human performance dashboard. They hang a few notes on the wall with painter's tape, not as trophies, as calibration. This is who they are serving. Funding meetings happen in rooms that prefer confidence theater. They walk in with throughput stories instead, graphs without fireworks, plots that show how a week got shorter for someone who was tired. Some rooms want metaphors about revolution. Jensen offers discipline. Some rooms want market share prophecies. Jensen offers developer retention. Enough rooms understand that boring truth is a better predictor than exciting fiction. The company gets the time it needs. They set their first rule about launches. Never promise the impossible. Promise what you can support on a bad day. If a driver will be fragile on an older OS, say it now. If a feature sings only when the wind is blowing from the east, remove the feature or build a roof. The reward for honesty is quiet loyalty. Quiet loyalty is more valuable than applause because it converts into schedules met and renewals signed and hiring done by word of mouth. In a corner of the office, a stack begins to take shape that is not just hardware. Libraries, tools, examples. A forum that does not punish ignorance, a habit of one engineer writing a 3-paragraph explanation that prevents 3 dozen engineers from asking the same question. The stack is humble at first, like a footbridge built across a ditch so a neighbor doesn't have to jump. But the ditch is deep for a lot of people, and the footbridge once placed becomes a route. A platform is just a lot of dependable footbridges maintained. Jensen insists on posture over theatrics. The jacket will become a uniform later, a friendly headline shorthand. What matters now is the tone. Show up, explain, ship, repeat. He believes in explanations that land at 2 altitudes, a line for the executive who needs to decide by lunch, a line for the engineer who needs to debug before dinner. He rehearses both lines until they feel like the same truth told from different floors of the same building. A small mythology grows, not because they cultivate it, but because people like to tell true stories that make work feel less lonely. The myth is that the company was born in a diner booth, and that is accurate enough for memory. The more precise truth is less cinematic and more useful. The company is born again every time someone answers a second email with respect, every time a README is repaired before a demo, every time a bug is converted into a sentence that guards the future. There are setbacks with names and dates. A partner pulls a purchase order because a driver missed a window that could not be missed. A demo on a borrowed projector exposes a timing edge they did not see in the lab. A board fails because a supplier swapped a component without warning. Each event threatens morale for about an hour. Then someone writes what will never happen again, and the lesson gets laminated into the way they work. They keep the temperature where work can breathe. The calendar rolls them toward incorporation, toward payroll, toward the first real shipment. The world is still indifferent. That is the world's job, but pockets of the world are becoming less indifferent because the kits do what they say and the people behind the kits behave like neighbors. You can build a reputation in 3 months if you are loud. You can build a reputation that lasts in 3 months if you are consistent. They choose consistent. There is a night when the office is as quiet as a church after a wedding. Boxes are stacked. Tracking numbers exist. Labels are straight. Someone has swept the floor with the same care they gave to the code. Jensen stands for a minute longer than he needs to and does not make a speech. He looks at the red flag list, erased for the week and already collecting new ink for Monday. He feels the modest weight of the first lane of a bridge. Not the whole bridge, but a lane you can drive across without getting your shoes wet when you step out on the other side. The diner did not give them magic. It gave them a table and a waitress who poured coffee when asked, and a place to say our kind of company out loud. The company is not the booth. The company is the boring excellence that follows the booth. Kits that arrive ready, docs that help, emails that are answered, a road that is older tomorrow than it is today because they keep laying surface and painting lines. And beneath all of it, a belief that graphics are a doorway and that behind the doorway is parallel work for problems that matter. Before he locks the door, Jensen writes one more line on a card and tapes it beside the red flag list. We will be the easiest people to build with. It is not grand. It is precise. It tells every future decision which direction to lean. Outside, the parking lot hums with sodium lights, and the night air smells like cardboard and new machines. Somewhere across town, the diner booth sits empty, waiting for other people to draw other beginnings on other napkins. Here, in this ordinary room, the sketch has become a place to stand. The first boxes are leaving in the morning. The bridge has a lane. The work, the real work, is to keep it open. The year feels like a hallway with doors on both sides. Some of the doors open to rooms that look the same as last year: drivers, demos, developer calls. Some open to rooms that smell like new plastic and hot tin, fresh boards, new memories, faster buses. In this hallway, the company must stay polite to two bosses at once: today's frame and tomorrow's math. If they neglect today's frame, nobody will pay for tomorrow's math. If they neglect tomorrow's math, today's frame becomes a treadmill. The compromise looks like craftsmanship. The compromise will have a name that sounds like motion. They have shipped things before, but Riva 128 is the first product that will reach far enough outside the building to change their days. You can feel it in the way people speak to one another at 9:30 at night. Fewer exclamation points, more specific verbs. The engineering floor is a landscape of anti-static bags that look like calm silver fish. Every bench has a board with a cable that is a little too short. Every screen shows numbers that argue politely about whether a decision was correct. When the board breathes and the driver holds, you can hear the small sound of a chair adjust, someone leaning an inch closer, not away. The team has learned a posture that does not require speeches. Measure where the pain lives, shorten it, measure again. They run scenes that developers actually use, not just the photogenic ones. A shadow that used to stutter now glides. A texture that used to smear now keeps its dignity when it moves. A studio writes to say a level that once gasped like a runner at altitude now feels like sea level. These are not fireworks. These are oxygen reports. You pin them to the wall to remember who you serve. Riva 128 is not a miracle. It is competence multiplied. The silicon respects the time budget of a frame. The memory pathways do not indulge drama. The driver tells the truth, even when the truth is, we can't do that at this resolution without asking for patience. Honesty becomes a feature. People do not mind boundaries if the boundaries are clear and stable. In a market that often promises the moon and then asks for a patch on Friday, stability feels like kindness. The board earns forgiveness in the places where it falls short because it does not lie about where it falls short. Inside the company, the day acquires a rhythm that sounds like a reliable machine. Morning regressions, midday red flags, afternoon doc fixes, evening builds. The regression meeting is not a courtroom, it's a clinic. A bug is a patient. You ask the same questions in the same order. Where does it hurt? When did it start? What changed in the last 24 hours that could make this pain honest? Patterns appear because patterns always appear if you keep them warm with your attention. The team takes notes and complete sentences because future you is a colleague who deserves clarity. They keep repeating a rule that almost no one writes on a t-shirt. A platform is what remains helpful after the demo. Riva 128 gives them permission to live by that rule. The demo looks fine. The week after the demo looks better. Developers report that the driver does not age like milk. It ages like a cast iron pan, better with use, easier to trust, good at holding heat. Word moves the way real word moves, accidentally on purpose. A developer at one company has a friend at another studio. We shipped with it. We slept. 2 sentences. A purchase order follows. The marketing materials are boring in a way that costs courage. There is no theater in memory bandwidth, fill rate, triangle throughput, DMA behavior when the bus is grouchy. But the audience that matters is allergic to theater. They want numbers, but they want numbers that survive the trip home. The company has learned to publish numbers that do not require stage lighting. If you place those numbers in fluorescent labs at the end of tired days, the numbers remain themselves. Reputation grows in those rooms. In the lab, you can see the next decade peeking through gaps in the present. Engineers write tools that weren't on the product plan because the engineers are tired of being tired. A script turns 3 hours of boring capture into 6 minutes of quiet observation. A harness makes failure findable. Someone draws a diagram on a whiteboard. How parallel work might be addressed if you taught the chip a language. Nobody calls it by name yet. They just circle the part where developers give up and write, "Make this humane." The note stays up for months. It becomes furniture. The parts of the company that will later be called the stack are being laid like bricks you don't bother to photograph. Tools that measure without gaslighting, documentation that doesn't punish newness, error messages that move like doormen, "Not here, try there, tell them I sent you." In a hallway, 2 young engineers stand murmuring over a flowchart that will quietly save hundreds of hours next year. They are not celebrated. They are useful. They will be here a long time. Riva Wonder 28 ships into a world that is crowded and loud. Competitors claim inventions that are the same shape as last year with a new adjective. Journalists want fresh metaphors. Investors want the word inevitable baked into the pie chart. The company keeps its voice low. They talk about ease, about drivers that don't strand, about kits that work on old, messy systems because the world is old and messy. It turns out that being polite to reality is a differentiator. The company's Friday 4 p.m. ritual continues, the second email of the week. A developer in a time zone that does not love them writes in the plain, slightly impatient tone you use when polite words have already been spent. The docs say X, but on board Rev B with driver Y on OSZ, Step 3 fails and the build crashes from a pathing issue. Please advise. The reply is sent 14 minutes later, a corrected path, a sentence that tells the truth about why the doc was wrong, an apology that carries no perfume, and a patch attached. The developer's response 2 minutes later is the true metric for the week. Thanks. Shipped. The room is quiet for a moment. Someone exhales the way you do after a small life was made easier. Riva 128 alters the company's internals in 3 ways that do not make headlines but will pay interest for years. Confidence allocation. Success tempts teams to believe the next success must also look like this success. Leadership insists that confidence belongs to habits, not to outcomes. The habit is what ships. The outcome is what is named. Keep worship for the habit. Bridge maintenance. As new customers arrive, the temptation is to add lanes to the bridge faster than you can paint lines. They do not add lanes until the lines are bright. This frustrates a few loud voices and quietly protects everyone else. Developer circle. They formalize an informal network of external allies, developers who think well, write clearly, and are good at telling you where your floor is soft. These are not influencers. These are carpenters of code. You ship them early builds. They will tell you if you are about to ship a sigh. Meanwhile, the Rivier name starts appearing in places that make people in the office laugh in a small, pleased way. A parts list taped inside a beige tower in a teenager's bedroom. A handwritten label on a crate at a small studio. Riva boards do not stack. A campus bulletin board with a flyer. Seeking help with OpenGL on Riva. Pizza provided. The product has stopped being a product. It is a character in other people's stories. That is what you want. But as soon as they can breathe, they return to a question that has been tapping lightly at the window since the diner days. What do we call the thing we're really building? Because Riva 128 is a relief, and relief buys you time, and time should buy you language. Language is a tool that allows rooms to agree about what they are doing next. If the world keeps talking about video cards and accelerators, the future will continue to arrive in pieces. But if there were a word for a processor built for parallel work, a word that is not merely a cousin of CPU, then maybe developers and researchers and professors could speak to each other across disciplines without wasting the first 10 minutes of every conversation. They start testing phrases in meetings the way tailors test fabric against the light. Vector engine, too academic. Parallel compute core, too bureaucratic. Graphics processing unit. It is plain, it is specific. It admits its origin in pictures while quietly pointing to something larger, processing. Unit. A unit you can buy, hold, code for, a device with a mandate. The room does not cheer. The room nods. Nods matter more. They build rosters of nods. While the word is forming, they tune the pattern of shipping. Riva 128 teaches them how to move the ceiling without collapsing the room. Faster memory, saner driver models. Clean up passes on the code paths that slow down when no one watches. They build checklists that testers mock lightly and then defend fiercely. They establish the custom that docks ship with the driver, not after. They learn to treat the README as a device with pins. You can short it out if you miswire a sentence. Precision in exposition becomes part of engineering. In small corners, CUDA's prehistory is being written invisibly. A utilities repo gains little programs meant only for internal use, kernels that do boring work quickly, pattern examples that prove two ideas can share a lane without arguing. One afternoon, someone writes a tiny tutorial that explains parallel loops in plain speech. Another engineer reads it and says, "My mom could follow this." They print it and tape it above a bench. It is a joke. It is also a steering wheel. Clarity is the only scalable fuel. Riva 128 forces them to honor the ecosystem in a way that only shipping does. Tool vendors need details at odd hours. Game developers need small exceptions that are actually large because they save weeks. Middleware companies want a promise that an interface will not change when the wind shifts. Universities want discounts because the work they do for free will become paid work in 3 years if you respect them now. In a budget meeting, someone says, "What is the ROI of being decent?" Jensen answers, "Compounding." The room accepts the math. There are setbacks that keep them honest. A board revision that solves one problem exposes another, and off by one that only shows up in a room with a brand of projector the company doesn't own yet. They buy the projector. A driver that behaves under stress in the lab limps in the wild when a popular game combines effects like a songwriter trying 4 keys at once. They bring the studio in, sit them at a bench, and watch how they work. The fix arrives because the context arrived. They write a rule. Proximity reduces mystery. Future problems will be solved by pulling people close, not by sending longer emails. The sales pipeline begins to look less like a list and more like a landscape. Long, flat plains of stable studios, small hills of universities and research labs, a few tall, wobbly pillars called strategic, which the company touches carefully because tall things fall hard. Riva 128 keeps the plains green. It steadies the hills. It teaches them to gird the pillars with support before they try to climb. At night, the building rests, but the inbox does not. Somewhere, always, a person is installing a driver on a machine you would have sworn nobody used anymore. Somewhere, always, a class of students is fighting a lab exercise that depends on a comma. Somewhere, always, a producer is counting minutes until a build must go gold. The company senses that if it wants to outlast mood and trend, It must fall in love with these somewheres. The glamour of launch fades in a week. The gravity of Tuesday does not fade. Riva 128 makes them into Tuesday people. They refine their speaking voice in public. Jensen learns to put two sentences side by side for audiences that do not share a mother tongue. One for the executive. This will shorten your schedule and steady your cost. One for the engineer. Here is the code path that got faster. Here is the buffer that no longer thrashes. Here is the tool that reveals your pain before the deadline does. The trick is that both sentences tell the same truth at different altitudes. People remember that feeling, the feeling of not being patronized. A small museum of mistakes as artifacts starts in the corner. A misprinted board with a silkscreen joke that no one caught until it was funny. A burned-out connector in a shadow box with a tag that reads, "Room was cold." A framed screenshot of an error message that accidentally apologized in haiku. New hires are taken to the shelf on the first Friday. The message is not, "Do not fail." The message is, "Fail so usefully that we can frame it and get better forever." By the time the quarter turns, Riva 128 is no longer a product launch in the company's head. It is proof of method. The method is boring and strong. Do the dull parts beautifully. Lower developer blood pressure. Choose metrics that survive fluorescent lights. Answer second emails as if they are the first. Teach the chip to be a good citizen in rude environments. Share the thinking in sentences that will still be true next year. The hallway of the year opens onto a larger room. On the far wall, a blank space waits for a word that will let everyone talk without wasting time. A word that honors pictures and points beyond them. A word that a professor can say in a lecture hall. A producer can say in a budget meeting. A teenager can say in a computer shop. And they will all mean the same thing. Someone writes 3 letters in dry erase and draws a square around them so the letters don't wander. GPU. No one shouts, no one claps. The team just keeps working with a little more alignment in their sentences. Riva 128 keeps shipping. The returns that do arrive come with notes that make them smarter. The purchases that follow carry quiet endorsements. We used it last time. We slept. In the late evening, after the last bench lights are dimmed, you can stand in the doorway and hear the after sound of a day that moved other people's work forward. That sound is small and addictive. It is the sound that keeps you returning to the hard part of the problem. One night, Jensen walks the floor the way a captain walks a deck after the crew has gone below. He stops at the whiteboard with the taped-up tutorial about parallel loops written in friendly language. He touches the paper at the corner to feel the tape crisp under his thumb. He is not thinking about markets or rivals. He is thinking about ease. The human relief that happens when a tool keeps its promise on a tired day. He suspects that the next promise will have to be larger than pictures, and that the only way to keep a larger promise is to teach the chip a language in which ordinary people can ask for parallel work without apology. He writes 4 words on a sticky note and leaves it on the red flag list where everyone will see it in the morning. Teach the chip English. It is not literal, it is precise. It means let the chip accept familiar forms. Let the developer write like a person. Let parallel work stop being a stage trick and start being a dial tone. The note will become a joke, then a motto, then a roadmap. Riva 128 has bought the time to make it real. The door clicks behind him. The building holds its breath. In a dozen cities, Riva cards are humming under desks where people are trying to meet Friday. Frames are arriving. Sleep is happening. The first lane of the bridge is open and painted. Beyond the guardrail, a longer road is visible now, not as fantasy but as work. The company will step onto that road next, carrying a new word out into the world and then giving the world a way to use it. The new decade opens like a warehouse after hours, quiet, fluorescent, full of aisles that look the same until you walk them. The company has earned a place in the market's daily weather. Developers expect the boards to breathe. Studios expect the drivers to hold. Reviewers expect the numbers to survive the trip home. That is good. It also hides a problem. The room is larger now, but the door still says graphics. And the work pressing at the windows is not only pictures, it is math that repeats itself like rain on a roof. It is models that want to finish while the data is still telling the truth. If pictures got them invited, parallel work is why they came. He carries the same question in his pocket for years, like a coin he keeps turning with his thumb. How do you let ordinary programmers ask a graphics chip to do non-graphics work without making them learn a priestly dialect? He can sketch technical answers in a dozen ways. APIs, shaders bent into unfamiliar shapes, tool chains with secret doors. Each answer saves a demo. None saves the weak. The problem is not power. The problem is reach. If you want thousands of people to adopt a habit, the habit has to feel like a path they already know. The hallway between GPU for pictures and GPU for everything that benefits from many simple hands is long. It is lined with ideas that almost work. The team tries each door. Some lead to nights of hope and mornings of exceptions. They discover that when you force general-purpose work through a graphic-shaped slot, you get clever but not comfortable. Clever is a party trick. Comfortable is a platform. While launches come and go, he asks for a second kind of work, quiet, stubborn, structural. Write the glue, he says in meetings that feel like carpentry. Write the scaffolds. People nod without drama, then go build boring bridges between parts of the stack. Libraries that don't make you apologize for not being a specialist. Runtime behavior that does not betray you when the room is cold. Tooling that finds what you did not know to test. The habit is simple. If a developer's day is shorter after using what you shipped, you are facing the right direction. If the day is the same length but has new nouns, you are probably kidding yourself. They court researchers in the way of neighbors, not salespeople. Come sit at a bench. Show us what you run. Where does it hurt? They watch protein folding code twitch. Weather models fill the screen like slow, patient storms. Finance matrices multiply until the numbers blur. Sometimes a shader hack gets them an overnight thrill. Just as often the hack collapses under the next paper's method like a tent in wind. They learn the difference between get it to run and let it live. Inside, the second email of the week ritual keeps the culture local to pain. One Friday, the winner is from a grad student whose code compiles only if she stands on one leg and hums. The reply is short and human, with a patch that doesn't make a ceremony out of the fix. 2 minutes later, works, I can submit. The room breathes out. These small victories accumulate in the spine of the company like calcium. He begins to say a sentence often enough that people could mouth the words with him. We don't just need features, we need a language, not a syntactic novelty. A felt language, one that lets a person who knows C or C++ or Fortran write a loop and feel in their bones that the loop now has many hands instead of one, without being forced to pretend it is drawing triangles. The chip must stop asking the world to cosplay as a pixel. The chip must learn to meet the world where the world already lives. The first sketches of this idea are small, almost shy. A utility kernel that does something dull as air, vector add, fast enough to be funny. An example that counts something a professor cares about, and counts it right. A memo that dares to write general-purpose computing on GPUs in a sentence without apologizing to graphics in the next breath. The hallway grows brighter. A whiteboard diagram appears and refuses to be erased. Threads, blocks, grids, memory spaces, a mental model that non-graphics people can carry around all day without feeling like they borrowed someone else's shoes. There are arguments, good ones, the kind that raise quality without raising voices. Should this be a library with clever hiding places or a programming model that stands tall and named? How much do we tell the programmer about the hardware's bones? How many sharp edges do we sand, knowing that every curve hides a cost? The company has learned to argue softly. They put the idea in the middle of the table and keep their hands in their laps. They test explanations at 2 altitudes. Can a tired developer repeat the model after lunch? Can a VP believe the roadmap on one slide? If not, there is no language yet, only ambition with good posture. The ecosystem notices before the press does. A handful of labs start knocking in that polite, impatient way. If we could write this in something closer to what we already use, we could give you numbers you could print. Numbers are nice. Behavior is better. He is not chasing a headline. He is chasing a day where a team that never planned to be graphics anything writes a kernel the way they would write a function and sees the world speed up without the feeling of having joined a secret society. They run pilots with people who don't have time for a new religion, oil and gas, universities, a finance desk that speaks in time units stranger than days. They learn the unkind truth of adoption. If your thing requires heroics every Wednesday, your thing dies in November. The only sustainable path is make Tuesday easier. So they remove knobs the world does not need. They add knobs the world needs but cannot name yet. They let developers be lazy in the right places and honest in the ones that carry consequences. Inside the hallways, the prehistory of the programming model accretes like a reef. Someone writes a tiny book of pitfalls explained in friendly English. Someone else writes comments in sample code that sound like a senior engineer speaking over your shoulder. You could do it this way, don't. Here's why. Here's how to get 80% of the benefit with 20% of the thought. A tester builds an evil suite, machines with cursed BIOS settings, drivers at odd versions, operating systems that no one admits to running. The model survives, or it doesn't. Either way, the notes are written in complete sentences, because tomorrow's you deserves kindness. The company decides on a tone for the thing that is coming, not mystical, not macho, practical. A logo that doesn't shout. A web page that begins with Hello World, and then Hello Biggish World. And then here is how to be kind to memory. Examples that fit in one screen and can be mailed without ceremony. Compiler errors that tried to be useful before they tried to be correct. If a message can admit confusion and still point you toward the fix, it will. There is a temptation to announce too early. Announcements are warm rooms. Warm rooms melt hard questions. He refuses to melt them. If we cannot teach a bright undergraduate this model in a week, we are not ready to brag, he says, in a meeting where the slides would like to fly. They pick a date only after teaching becomes boring internally. Boring is a milestone. It means the path is a path, not an excursion. Even as they prepare a language, they must keep shipping graphics with the same reliability. The dual trust problem is real. If you ask the world to bet on your new idea while you drop a frame on Friday, the world votes with its feet. So the teams walk and chew. Frames land. Demos hold, partners ship. And in the next room, the language learns to breathe. He spends his weeks walking between rooms and altitudes, careful not to carry the wrong urgency from one to the other. Urgency is not contagious here. Clarity is. They start saying the word platform more often, but not as a self-congratulation, as a responsibility. A platform is a place where other people store confidence. If the floor moves under them, they do not come back. So the rules get carved deeper. Ship drivers and docks together. Neither is a +1. Reward engineers who lower developer blood pressure. Measure it in second emails. Expose truths about the hardware without making the programmer feel scolded. Let ordinary code be excellent. Save heroics for the last 5%, not the first 50. Pieces of the model harden. Threads, yes. Blocks, yes. Grids, yes. A memory hierarchy that asks programmers to care only where care buys them hours. Patterns that can be copied and pasted into new minds. The team studies how people actually learn, not by reading a manual front to back, by copying an example, breaking it, fixing it, and then generalizing the feeling. So the examples are designed as skippable ladders. You can climb one rung and stop. You can come back next month and find the next rung where you left it. The first time an outside group reports a speed-up that is both big and boring, not a stunt, not a cherry-picked case, just a real workload that goes from days to hours, he does not make a speech. He asks for the notes. Which lines changed? Which lines hurt? Which lines were fine but felt scary? They fold those answers back into the teaching. The world will say breakthrough later. Inside they say Tuesday got shorter, and that is the currency. The documentation voice gets tuned like an instrument. You can hear it first in margin notes. If this sounds like magic, it isn't. Here's the cash. If this seems slow, it is. Here's why. And here's the knob you can ignore until you can't. If you're reading this at 2 a.m., we see you. The team knows that tone keeps people from quitting. Tone is not fluff. Tone is uptime for human minds. A few critics argue fairly that serious programming models are born in conferences and journals, not in companies that sell boards. He listens without flinching. Then he answers with behavior. He sends engineers to conferences with papers and examples. He funds courses that teach the model to students who will pay it forward for free. He releases samples that make it clear they want thinking to travel. The line between academia and product blurs in the healthiest way. Both sides get better because the bridge is maintained, not just built for ribbon cutting. There are weeks that smell like defeat. A regression murders performance in a case that will be everyone's favorite benchmark next fall. A driver deadlocks on a motherboard that was never supposed to matter, and then does. A half sentence in the docs causes 100 people to make the same wrong assumption. Each time, the fix is a chore, not a stunt. They do the chore. They add a test. They rewrite the sentence in a way that prevents 100 future wrongs. The collection of such prevention becomes the true asset. The language in waiting gets a name. Short. Pronounceable. With a mouthfeel that doesn't make a person feel like they joined a cult to say it. Internally, people learn to pronounce it without smiling. Externally, they will introduce it with calm, not the lightning strike story. The "we needed this, you needed this, here is the path, walk with us" story. He tries the keynote sentence in front of a mirror twice, then puts the mirror away. The sentence must stand in any room, not just this one. This is a way to program the GPU as a general-purpose parallel processor. The audacity hides inside the plainness. Before the announcement, they do something unglamorous and rare. They teach first. Internal classes for people who have not touched the code. Internal classes for people who cannot spare more than an afternoon. Then external classes at events where swag usually matters more than syntax. They discover an encouraging ratio. For every 10 people who try for an hour, 7 get something non-trivial to run, 3 do something that surprises them, and 1 writes at midnight to say they changed a line and something clicked. That ratio is enough to proceed. The corridor narrows into a door. On the other side is a model that will let the chip stop pretending it is only a painter and let the world stop pretending it has time to write shaders for protein folding. He remembers the sticky note from months back. Teach the chip English, still on the red flag board's frame, corners curling. It was a joke. It was a plan. Now it feels like a policy. Launch day comes in a room that smells like carpet glue and AV gear. He wears the jacket, but the jacket is not the news. The news is a slide with code that looks like the code you already know, plus a few new words that feel like handles, not ornaments. The demo is untheatrical on purpose. A loop, a transformation, an output that arrives with the unexciting perfection that lets you go home on time. He speaks in the dual-sentence cadence the company has practiced for years. The executive line, your schedule gets shorter for the work you actually do. The engineer line, Here is the memory model. Here is how to think about occupancy. Here is the tool that tells you when you guessed wrong. Applause is polite. Good. Polite applause is a better omen than hysteria. Hysteria cools into suspicion. Polite applause grows into show me. They are ready for show me. The tutorials are posted. The kits are boxed. The forum is staffed by people who like being asked the same question with slightly different punctuation. Someone writes the first community guide that the company did not commission. It is good. They link it on the official page. Platforms grow when other people's sentences start to carry your idea farther than you can. He walks the floor that night after the cables are coiled and the room returns to its ordinary size. He thinks about the diner, the red flag list, the first boards that breathed, the word GPU boxed on a whiteboard, the quiet Fridays when a second email saved someone's weekend. The corridor was long because it had to be. You cannot skip to a language. You have to grow one in a place where people trust the floors. The chip did not become smarter. The relationship did. Back at the office, a developer email arrives at 1:13 a.m. Their subject line is plain. First try. The body contains 8 lines of code and 1 sentence. Took me an hour to understand the grid, then it ran. He forwards it to the team with 3 words that sound like him because they are him. Keep it boring. Boring is Tuesday. Tuesday is how revolutions survive. The work ahead is obvious and heavy. Teaching at scale. Tooling, that stops being clever and becomes invisible. Agreements with partners who will test the edges of every promise. 1,000 correctives on docs and errors and examples as real life pushes through. He wants all of it. Not because headlines are sweet, but because ease is addictive once you have tasted it. Someone somewhere will fold proteins faster, model storms sooner, count what needs counting before the market closes. The chip is still a painter. Now it can also be a factory floor of steady hands. He turns off a lamp and leaves the sticky note where it has always been. The corridor is behind them. The language is in the world. Tomorrow will be measured not in applause, but in second emails that say thanks and shipped, and sometimes still confused. Help. Those are the right words. Those words mean the bridge connects to another shore. The rest of the story will be about crossings. The word appears first like a label on a drawer, plain, square, and useful. Graphics processing unit. 3 letters that do not try to be interesting. They try to be correct. Inside the building, the word lands with a tidy click, as if the room had been waiting for a handle that fit the hand. Outside the building, the word is a kind of invitation. If you can name a thing, you can talk about it without wasting time. Talking without waste is how work gets done. He likes words that behave. The old vocabulary, accelerators, cards, adapters, kept implying add-on and afterthought, as if the heart of computation always beat in one place and everything else was a garnish. The new word admits the origin, graphics, and still points past the door. Processing is the important middle. Unit is the important end, not an accessory. A unit you can schedule, provision, buy, and teach. A machine with a job. Words have to survive lighting changes. He tests GPU in 3 rooms. In a lab lit by fluorescence at 2 a.m., a student says, GPU, without rolling her eyes. Good. In a boardroom where the coffee is too proud of itself, a VP says, GPU, and no one smirks. Good. In a game studio that trades deadlines the way climbers trade rope, a producer says, GPU, and gets a nod that means we can price that. Good. The word can earn its keep in all 3 climates. It can write an invoice and a syllabus. It can live in a driver readme and on a keynote slide. It is the kind of word engineers forgive. Claiming a word is different from using one. To claim it, you have to make other people successful with it. 3 acts, repeated, explain it, ship it, help with it. The company builds a small traveling show that does not feel like a show. Engineers with backpacks, laptops that have lived in airports, sample code that compiles on a stage where the projector resists. They speak at conferences with the modesty of carpenters. This is where it bends. This is where it holds. This is the nail to use if the wood is old. Slides have verbs more than adjectives. Demos are short and polite to failure. The applause is the right size. You can still hear the AV fan. The industry's mood is mixed, as it should be. Some people love a new noun because it sounds like a shortcut. Some people distrust a new noun because it sounds like marketing. He refuses to decorate the word. He uses it like a wrench. He says GPU the way you would say lathe or vice. Not mystical, not macho, just a thing that holds work steady so the cut is true. When a journalist asks for a metaphor, he returns a sentence. It's a processor designed to do many small things at once. The reporter is slightly disappointed. The audience is slightly reassured. The trade-off is intentional. The word makes its way into drivers, docs, tooltips, and release notes that would rather be quiet. That is where words win or lose on Tuesdays in the small print. A driver pop-up that once said, "Your adapter," now says, "Your GPU." A sentence in the docs that once bent itself around graphic subsystem straightens into GPU. A help page that once apologized for not knowing what the user meant now asks a concrete question. Which GPU? Precision turns strangers into neighbors. There is pushback from people who prefer their vocabulary older than they are. He does not argue. He ships behavior. When the GPU stops being a rectangle, you fight in a device manager and starts being a place where time is saved. The vocabulary follows the savings. Studios report shorter nights. Labs report earlier results. Reviews begin to say the word without flinching. It is not correct because he said it. It is correct because rooms of tired people began to say it and then kept saying it even when no one was listening. Under the word, the stack thickens. APIs, drivers, compilers, profilers, libraries, sample code, dev kits, support addresses that actually deliver support. The team lays footbridges between disciplines that did not think they were neighbors. A shader author discovers he is, in a way, a parallel programmer. A mathematics graduate student discovers she is, in a way, a GPU user, though she has never once drawn a triangle with intent. The footbridges are modest. They are the kind of bridges you double-check with your heel and then trust forever. In meeting rooms, the company rehearses a dual-sentence cadence that will be used for a decade. Sentence for the executive. The GPU shortens your schedule for this class of jobs. Sentence for the engineer. Here is the memory model. Here is the tool. Here are 3 patterns that win. Here are 2 that tempt and betray. These 2 sentences must be the same truth told at 2 altitudes. If they are not, someone is lying. He is allergic to lies, even efficient ones. Efficient lies leave expensive debris. Owning the word also means owning its edges. People will try to make GPU carry more than it can, the way a moving truck is asked to carry a piano up a spiral staircase. He teaches rooms to say no politely. The GPU will not make a serial loop noble. The GPU will not fix a slow mind. The GPU will not correct an ill-posed problem. What it will do is reward honest parallelism, problems that consent to being many small hands instead of one big one. Once you admit that, progress becomes a geometry exercise. Where are the rectangles of work? How do you tile them? Where does memory need to meet them? Engineers relax when nouns come with boundaries. The press likes firsts. He dislikes anniversaries and cupcakes in the lab. He measures ownership by how questions change. Before, is a GPU a video card? After, how many GPUs does this workload want? And how do we feed them without starving the CPU? Before, will this run on my card? After, what occupancy should I expect? And what knob hurts least when the data spikes? When questions improve, the word is winning. When the word is winning, the rooms are smarter. A quiet turning point is education. The company helps universities teach what used to be folklore. They send kits, they fund courses, they post syllabi with permission to reuse. They do not brand the margin notes like a soda sponsorship. A professor is not a billboard. The promise is pragmatic. If you teach it, the students will be employable, the labs will be faster, and they will write papers whose conclusions arrive before the coffee gets cold. Students write GPU into theses without quotation marks. That is the day you know a word belongs to the world. Meanwhile, the tooling learns manners. Profilers stop scolding and start suggesting. Compilers grow error messages that point in the direction of the fix without pretending to be oracles. Examples are audited like code. If a one-screen example causes 100 people to guess wrong in the same way, the fault is in the example, not in 100 minds. The company learns to treat the example gallery as a public square. Keep it clean, keep it inviting, replace the broken bench. Standards appear and argue. Some want a single umbrella where every vendor can stand, and portability is a promise that speaks softly. Some want house keys, tight integration, tuned to metal, where performance is a full-throated choir. He refuses to turn standards into a flag to wave. He treats them like airports. You need more than one. You need to land safely in all kinds of weather. You pick flights based on the route and the clock, and you don't monologue to passengers about runway asphalt. You get them where they need to go. Publicly, he supports paths. Privately, he demands results. The test remains Tuesday. Does a person with a deadline cry less? The word GPU begins to slip its leash. Weather people say it. Finance desks say it. Biologists say it with the shy relief of someone who has discovered a tool that respects fatigue. The cross-pollination is practical, not poetic. A climate modeler and a graphics engineer trade a trick in a hallway, and both leave richer. Papers cite toolkits the company built for developers who will never know the author's names. Products shipped that few consumers know contain 5 layers of libraries the platform team maintains without applause. This is what owning a word looks like. Maintenance. There is also the temptation of victory laps. Markets clap. Headlines count zeros. He keeps the company's posture narrow. Ship, explain, help. They still do the Friday second email ritual because words are owned on Fridays. One week, the winning email is 5 lines from a film house. Render queue didn't puke this time. Same scene, same deadline, less swearing, the sex. It goes on the wall next to the graduate student's submission went through, and the quant's overnight no longer means tomorrow. That little museum of relief calibrates ambition better than any stock chart. Owning the word also means defending it when it is used as a costume. Vendors bolt LEDs to a board and call it a GPU, as if the noun is a sticker. He declines to argue on Twitter. He fixes behavior. When a shop buys his GPU and someone else's and tries both on an honest workload, the noun proves itself without a press release. Competitors are not enemies. They are mirror checks. If the mirror shows a flaw, you fix the face, not the glass. As the 2000s fold into the early 2010s, another phrase rides shotgun with GPU, platform. He uses the word reluctantly because it gets abused. Everything ambitious wants to be a platform. He defines it at each altitude, in 2 sentences, again. To executives, a platform is where other people store confidence. To engineers, a platform is hardware, plus software, plus teaching, plus support, that stays true when the room is cold. By this measure, owning GPU demands chips that breathe, drivers that do not strand, libraries that meet real problems halfway, tools that let you see yourself making a mistake while it is still inexpensive, and people who answer second emails like first ones. None of this is romantic. All of it keeps rooms from breaking. There are detours. A much-praised demo becomes a liability because it encourages a fragile pattern. They retire it and replace it with a less glamorous example that survives Tuesday. A partnership demands exceptions that smell like future regret. They say no and lose the quarter and keep the decade. A fashionable abstraction covers the floor like confetti. They vacuum and return to the wood grain. The best days feel like maintenance. That is not a complaint. That is the definition of ownership. You maintain the word you claimed. He gives a talk one fall, where the slide deck is mostly nouns and numbers. Near the end, he returns to the first slide, GPU, and says a sentence that sounds like him because it is him. This is not just a thing we make. It is a place where we promise not to waste your time. The audience laughs a little because it is too plain for a stage. The engineers in the back nod because it is the only promise that scales. By now, research posters in quiet hallways use the word as casually as FFT or cache. Systems diagrams in glossy pitch decks draw boxes labeled GPU without defending the label. Procurement documents list GPU counts the way they list square footage for a warehouse. The word has become furniture. That is the goal. Furniture is what lets life happen without announcing itself. Internally, the company tracks a few private metrics to keep pride domesticated. Average time to first kernel for a new developer, median second email response time, percent of example projects that compile on weird machines, doc changes initiated by external feedback within 7 days. None of these are hero numbers. All of them are trust numbers. He likes trust numbers because they do not care about hype cycles. They care about care. The culture of boring excellence keeps paying. Profiler UI revisions are tested on people who do not have patience to spare. Installer flows are timed on laptops that deserve a pension. Error messages are rewritten by someone who is good at saying sorry without using the word sorry. When someone asks why this is the CEO's business, he answers with a carpenter's shrug, because the floor is the business. At the end of this arc, roughly a dozen years of saying GPU until it sounds like a table you can put your elbow on, the world starts to push the company toward general-purpose uses with a force that does not need persuasion: weather, biology, imaging, search, training models that feel like cliffs you climb with math. The lanes the word opened are crowded in the best way. Cars of all kinds, moving at different speeds, honking politely, arriving before midnight. He walks past the red flag list late one evening and reads the week's scribbles with the same small, satisfied frown he had in the diner years ago. The sticky note from a previous season, "Teach the chip English," is gone now, not because the joke got old, but because the plan became policy. On a nearby whiteboard, someone has written 2 rectangles and an arrow. GPU. Platform. The arrow is not a boast. It is a maintenance schedule. Chips must get faster. Networks must get wider. Software must get kinder. Teaching must get cheaper. Support must get calmer. Words do not stay owned if you stop behaving like the person who earned them. He leaves the building, and the night air smells like servers that never sleep. Somewhere a student is finishing a paper because the kernel finally ran. Somewhere a studio is locking a build at midnight without extra coffee. Somewhere a researcher is watching a number settle before the grant window closes. He did not give them talent. He did not give them certainty. He gave them a word that could be used as a tool, and then he gave them the tools that made the word true. Back home, he writes 3 lines in a notebook that has replaced the earlier notebooks, but not their attitude. Own nouns by reducing Tuesday pain. Teach at 2 altitudes until both rooms nod. Keep the floor truer than the slide. Under the lines he writes nothing because silence is the right punctuation when a word begins to stand on its own. He closes the notebook, and the room is quiet enough to hear the small machinery of the house. The refrigerator, the clock, the breath of an ordinary night. The word GPU will be said in 1,000 rooms tomorrow. If those rooms are calmer after saying it, the ownership is intact. If not, there is work to do. He is happiest when there is work to do. The change does not begin with a keynote. It begins with a hallway that smells like cardboard and ozone. Pallets arrive with foam corners and customs tape. A loading dock light blinks. A team in quiet shoes wheels in crates that weigh the way intent weighs. A decade of chips and drivers has taught the company how to serve a single workstation, a studio, a lab bench. Now the requests carry a different temperature. The requests sound like this: we do not want a kit. We want a room that works. A room that works is not a chip multiplied. It is a system. Systems are not glamorous when you stand close. They are screws and rails and airflow that refuses drama. They are BIOS settings that stay where you left them. They are messages that cross a cable and arrive exactly as sent. Systems are also choices you cannot hide. Choose a backplane. Choose a fabric. Choose a fan curve that respects the human who must enter the aisle at 3 a.m. Choose how a box will fail when a part goes tired. Choose who answers the phone when someone's week is at risk. He walks through the new lab with a notebook and the habit of looking for what is not owned. Fans hum in a tone that tells you they have room to spare. Engineers kneel on foam mats and route cable with the respect a climber gives rope. Someone has taped a paper square to a faceplate with a pencil line at the center. The line says, "Air wants this." The paper is a joke. It is also a specification. Systems cannot be bullied into working. They have to be persuaded. You do that with narrow paths where physics is happy. The idea collects near a name that sounds like a door frame. DGX. 3 letters that do not care about applause. The promise is not speed for a single desktop. The promise is a place where a team can train a model or push a simulation or render at scale without inventing a data center from YouTube tutorials and hope. You are not buying a box. You are buying less waiting that survives Tuesdays. They start with a rule that feels like an old friend in a new room. Do the boring parts beautifully. A DGX is a stack of boring parts joined with obsession. Chassis alignment that does not punish the rack. Power that rises like a plane that does not make people hold hands. Airflow that treats heat like paperwork, processed and gone. Latches that can be opened by a person in gloves who did not sleep. Screws that do not strip under that person's hand. Documentation that is not a ceremonial PDF, but a map someone can skim with a head full of deadlines. The software must grow a body that respects the box. Drivers and firmware and libraries form layers like grain in wood. They cannot cross in ugly ways. The team talks about full stack with the tone of people who have learned where brag ends and maintenance begins. Full stack here means the thing you ship must remain itself under pressure. If a customer updates a package at the wrong hour, the floor may still hold. If a network goes sideways, the work should not fall into a ditch. Grace under stupid circumstances is a design requirement. They practice wires between racks thinking. The room is not one box. The room is a conversation. Switches route the conversation. Cables carry the tone of it. The tone must be even and kind. They pick fabrics that do not ask packets to apologize. High bandwidth, low latency, predictable behavior when everything decides to talk at once. They bring in the people who can hear a dirty link the way a mechanic hears a tired belt. There, someone says, standing 5 feet from a rack, that port is lying. They pull the cable. They replace the SFP. The lie stops. Maintenance is a human sense before it is a graph. Researchers arrive with problems that have weight. The conversations are modest and exact. We need to train a model that does not fit in one card without amputations. We need to run an experiment that fails politely when a node goes dark. We need to stop wasting Wednesdays on glue. He asks the question he has asked since the diner booth. Where does it hurt? The answers are never nouns. The answers are routines and walls and weight states that stack. The DGX team turns those answers into rails and scripts and defaults that lean the work forward by degrees so small you only notice them at scale. The company learns to sell time without promising time travel. A DGX does not only run a job faster, it removes hours that used to be paid in blood pressure. No more hand-built drivers on a workstation that plays prima donna when you need obedience. No more shopping cart of parts that may or may not agree to be a family. A DGX arrives with agreements already in it. Agreements between parts, agreements between teams, agreements between what the box wants and what the room can give. You can walk the racks and read the ethics of assembly. Zip ties cut clean. Cables in arcs that will not catch a sleeve. Labels that can be read by a person who left their glasses in the car. Air that exits in a path the building was willing to donate. Rails that accept a box without judgment. Engineers who stop and listen before they close a door. A system is a choir. A bad voice can be tuned. A bad score cannot. They keep rewriting the score until it sings at human volume. Networking becomes a first-class citizen, not an afterthought. When compute is fast and data is shy, the room spends its days waiting. They invest in the parts of reality people cannot Instagram. Switch chips, queuing, flow control, error counters that tell the truth. They bring in new colleagues who speak InfiniBand or Ethernet with the fluency of a child's first language. They acquire expertise rather than renting it. Acquisitions become organs, not jewelry. You measure success by whether Tuesday got calmer, not by whether Wednesday's headline said synergy. The software stack gains muscles it did not have. Libraries that lift heavier things without showing strain. Compilers that notice when you are hurting yourself with a pattern and nudge you back. Containers that herd complexity into pens where it cannot trample your schedule. Orchestrators that let you see across boxes without admitting how much seeing costs. Monitoring that speaks in enough numbers to be honest, and few enough to be believed. Messages that explain, not accuse. He repeats 2 sentences until the room can finish them. A platform is hardware plus software, plus teaching, plus support. A system is a promise that parts will behave like a whole when the room is tired. People nod because they know the tired room. They have stood in it with a problem that refused to shrink until a human showed up who could hear the wrong pitch in a fan wall and the wrong sentence in a config file. They formalize a field loop that feels like a heartbeat. Boxes go out. Logs come back. Not to punish an engineer, to feed a design. Failure gets turned into a test that runs before the next shipment leaves. A sentence in the guide that caused 100 wrong choices gets rewritten until the wrong choice is hard to make. You can chart trust by counting how many fixes appear without anyone filing a ticket. After a year, you can draw the line. It has slope. Slope is the shape of stewardship. The DGX room inherits the company's old rituals. The second email still matters. Now it might come from a data center operator at 0114 who cannot spare a metaphor. Node 7 flapped. Links bounced. We hate bouncing. Advice? The reply is precise and calm. Update this firmware. Lock this setting. Here is the one-liner for the fabric. If the port stays chatty, here is the RMA number. We will not lose your Friday. Relief arrives. The operator replies with a photo of a green dashboard and a single word that means the world here. Stable. Someone pins it? No. They paste it into a runbook. That is worship enough. They decide that dev kits scale poorly when the problem is a room, so they ship reference rooms. Configs that have been humiliated under heat. Airflow diagrams that assume a clumsy human. Power plans that do not trust the building. Rack elevations that leave space for hands. These are not glamorous documents. They are maps. The day a customer sends a photo of a row that matches the map and writes, "It worked," a design team that stayed up too late to argue about a comma gets paid. The company studies human error and chooses mercy. Most outages begin with someone doing a reasonable thing at the wrong hour. So, they move risk. Defaults are protective instead of impressive. Warnings are plain instead of clever. Actions that can hurt are behind two quiet doors. Actions that must be fast are on one big button with a label a tired person will not misread. They watch hands. They tune the UI to reduce tremor cost. It is not cute to ship a dashboard that looks like a movie. It is kind to ship a dashboard that makes it hard to be wrong. They keep their voice small in public. They talk about throughput and uptime. They show graphs that survive fluorescent light. They quote customers who do not do adjectives. A researcher says, "We trained the thing we meant to train." A studio says, "Render farm stopped sighing." A national lab says, "We got an answer while the data was fresh." The verbs carry the day. Adjectives stay in their lane. Internally, they teach systems empathy to people who have never racked a box. If you write a library, you spend a day with fans in your ears and an operator at your elbow. If you design a faceplate, you sit with a developer who reads logs like a poet. If you manage a roadmap, you shadow a field engineer who can pull a cable with the decisiveness of a surgeon and the gentleness of a nurse. Cross-pollination is not a slide. It is a shift on the floor. They invest in diagnostics that speak human. A log that says, "link degraded" is not enough. A log that adds, "likely bad transceiver, port 17, see Runbook section 6.2, turns a bad morning into a solvable hour. A profiler that blames a kernel without telling you about the real choke in I/O is a liar." They choose tools that confess. Confession saves time. The economics of the room change the way they schedule pride. Pride wants to spike. Rooms want to hold. So they stagger updates. They warn ahead. They treat backwards compatibility like a health code. When they must break something, they walk people across with scripts, with people on phones, with long windows, with rollback that works. Later, when people say the company is trusted, what they mean is that breakage felt like a conversation, not a cliff. Partnerships deepen. Storage vendors bring boxes that sleep beside DGX like old dogs who know each other's habits. Networking vendors tune queues so traffic passes like a polite city. Cloud teams compare notes like weather people trying to name a storm. None of this looks like a poster. All of it reduces KPI of misery in rooms where people are paid to wait as little as possible. He keeps asking the same Wednesday question. What makes Friday shorter for someone who is tired? The answers drive small changes that are larger than they look. A pull-out rail that is kinder to wrists. A chassis latch that admits a gloved hand. A label font that a human can read at arm's length while kneeling. A container image that contains all the things the paper says it does. A firmware bundle that matches the version table without surprises. None of these star in a keynote. All of them are how keynotes earn the right to exist. They plant training in soil that grows, not hype sessions. Classes that begin with, "Here is the thing that usually goes wrong," and end with, "Send us the log if it does." They publish run books that talk like people. They accept that many operators learn by touch. So they include photos of hands doing the correct thing. Idiot-proofing is a cruel phrase. Stress-proofing is the right one. You build for the hour when the person holding the cable did not sleep. The team adopts SLOs that measure feelings with numbers. Setup time from pallet to productive hour. Median time to first successful training run with a standard recipe. Time from link is lying to link tells the truth. Percentage of support tickets closed with one exchange. You can fake a story. You cannot fake those curves for long. The curves bend. They print them. They do not frame them. They place them on the red flag wall to remind themselves that slope dies when pride replaces practice. The rooms that hum are not only on-prem now. Cloud grows its own aisles. The company learns to ship a room-shaped idea to places where the customer never sees the screws. The same ethics follow. Boredom where boredom is safety. Clear knobs where control is needed. Honest limits where physics will not play along. You can sell a faster VM with a pretty page. You keep the customer when the VM does not surprise them on Thursday. He keeps the keynote sentences steady, tuned to two altitudes. For executives, we sell less waiting. For engineers, here are the parts that agree to behave together with logs that confess and tools that see. Here's what we made easy. Here's what we left sharp on purpose. The trick is to make both sentences land as the same truth. If they diverge, rooms break. The stack matures into something like a neighborhood. Frameworks live on one corner, libraries on another. Compilers and profilers and deployment tools form a small town with sidewalks that are swept. Visitors can arrive at any corner and still find their way to the center. That is the work of years. Paint lines, fix cracks, post the speed limit where it was missing, replace broken benches. Wave at the same faces and learn their habits so you can serve them before they ask. The DGX aisle becomes a place people show to visitors the way a parent shows a kitchen they finally renovated. This is where we used to waste afternoons. This is where the queue stops stalling. This is the button we trust now. The best compliment is not amazing. The best compliment is boring. It's boring now. Boring is the adjective that wins careers. It means the system became a floor that does not wobble. It means your mind is free for the part of the job that is actually hard. Setbacks still arrive. A firmware bundle inherits a small arrogance and bricks two machines on a Thursday. A switch line burps under a specific pattern that no vendor lab measured. A dock example teaches a habit that ruins an edge case for 1,000 users. The postmortems are as plain as ever. What did we assume? Who paid for that assumption? What sentence would have prevented that bill? The fix is shipped. The sentence is written. The test enters the suite. The suite runs before the next pallet leaves. By the time the decade turns, the system has become a stage where larger acts can perform. The models that looked like cliffs now look like mountains with a path. The path has switchbacks and shade. The path has signs. People still get tired. They do not get lost. The company did not become famous for racks. The company became trusted for rooms that work, rooms where chips, software, wires, air, and people agree to behave like a single intention. Late one evening, he stands at the end of an aisle and listens. The fans have a tone that says nothing is panicking. The switch lights chatter like a city at peace. A field engineer leans on a cart and sips from a paper cup that has outlived its logo. On a monitor, a training curve rises and then flattens in the way good curves flatten. He remembers the diner napkin and the word GPU boxed on a whiteboard and the sticky note that said, "Teach the chip English." Those were words. This is the place those words promised. He writes one more line for the runbook cover, in a font that no one will mistake for marketing. Systems are people plus promises that hold when the room is cold. It is not clever. It is useful. He closes the notebook. A pallet jack whispers past. Somewhere beyond these racks, someone will sleep because a job ran on time and an answer arrived while the data still told the truth. The boxes and wires did not make that happen alone. The promises did, the practice did, the boring excellence did. The aisle lights step down tonight. The room hums like a calm river. The bridge they opened years ago now carries trucks. The guardrails are painted. The signs are legible. The crews change without the song changing. Tomorrow will bring new loads and new weather and a ticket that begins with urgent. Good. The point of a system is not to end the work. The point is to make the work survivable. The first time he stands at the end of a long aisle and watches packets move as if they were weather, he understands that compute by itself is a half sentence. Throughput has a twin. The twin is transport. A single box is a good story. A row is a better one. A building is an obligation. Now the work is to turn wires into highways and to make the highways behave like a single road, even when the map says otherwise. He learns to listen for congestion the way a road engineer listens for tires. Fans have a note when the room is hot. Switches have a note when the room is busy. Humans have a note when the room is unfair. The unfair note is not anger. It is preventable delay. Jobs that stall in silence. Links that flap. Retries that look like politeness and feel like sand. He draws a line in a notebook. If the work is honest and parallel, the network must not turn it serial by accident. Below the line, he writes, "Feed the chips." Feeding chips is not a shopping list. It is a truce between physics, money, and rooms full of people with deadlines. Bandwidth high enough to drown doubt. Latency that arrives before complaint. Determinism that makes performance a promise, not a rumor. He walks through rack rows with people who can hear a sick port from across the aisle. He asks them to teach the rest of the company the same sense. They do, patiently, with stories that start, "It was 2 a.m., and the graph said, 'Okay,' but the fan said otherwise." The architecture grows spines and leaves in words that feel like city planning. Leaf-spine topologies, fat tree, close, cables labeled like avenues instead of alleys. They choose components the way surgeons choose tools, proven, predictable, forgiving when hands are tired. Interconnect becomes the kind of noun that can end a week or save one. They stop treating it as a paragraph at the end of a spec. It becomes the first paragraph. He repeats a sentence until it sounds like furniture. Compute without supply is theater. Supply here is everything the chips need to stay awake at full speed. Data, gradients, checkpoints, messages that coordinate thousands of small hands into one working crowd. When the supply starves, the crowd idles with perfect discipline, and the chart looks respectable, while the job goes nowhere. Respectable charts can lie. The room cannot. They wire the room to tell the truth. It is not enough to bolt faster links to the side of a problem and call it solved. They design handshakes, GPU to GPU inside a box, GPU to GPU across boxes, box to switch, switch to switch. They map the paths where oversubscription is a hidden tax and pay down that tax with fabric and policy. They add telemetry that is not merely data, but advice. Counters that whisper, "You think this is compute-bound. It is not. Look here. Turn this." He watches teams discover a practical religion. Zero copy where you can, compression where it helps, contention where it cannot be avoided, but can be scheduled. They add collectives that move tensors like a disciplined crowd carrying sandbags. They build schedulers that act like air traffic control, not a loud bouncer. They test failure modes with the ruthlessness of firefighters. Pull a cable mid-flight, power down a switch, drop a node while 100 jobs are in queue. The room should sigh, not scream. They measure the sigh. In this season, he learns that some ambitions are best met by adoption, not invention. If someone else spent a decade learning how to move bits like a city moves water, you do not rewrite their pipes for sport. You partner. Sometimes you bring them inside. The point is not to own a logo. The point is to own the behavior your customers need on Tuesday at 1:14 a.m. He tests the culture's answer to acquisitions by watching what happens after the press release. Do the new people have door codes, not just badges? Do their graphs flow into yours? Do their run books get edited by your hands and theirs until the pages smell like the same shop? If the answer is yes, the purchase was an organ. If the answer is no, it was jewelry. Organs keep rooms alive. He keeps the definition of platform taped to the wall. Hardware plus software plus teaching plus support. At this scale, he adds a clause, plus corridors. Corridors are the relationships between things, the wires, protocols, and practices that let a room behave like one machine. Corridors are not a background detail. Corridors are the argument the building is making to physics. Let this look simple to humans. When physics says no, you adjust the argument. Different switch, different cue, different habit. There is a second thread in this chapter that runs parallel to highways and handshakes. It is about discipline when ambitions go large and friction arrives wearing a suit. The company has built a habit of being early to the hard thing and staying late. Sometimes staying late means recognizing that the room you wanted to enter has rules you cannot obey without becoming someone else. He does not speak in headlines about this. He speaks in fit. Does the path serve the platform, or does it demand that the platform bend until the floor is no longer true? Big bets are not just numbers. They are integrations of culture. Will your drivers and their drivers agree in a storm? Will your roadmaps talk the same tense? Will your Tuesday be shorter or louder? He measures potential by time saved for strangers, not by applause saved for himself. If the math comes back red, if the path would feed ego and starve the customer, he can say no without bitterness. Discipline is not the cold part of leadership. It is the warm part. It protects rooms where people work. Saying no is a quiet act. Press will ask for a story with a beginning, a villain, and a moral that fits in a paragraph. He offers the unexciting answer, fit. Fit with customers, fit with time, fit with the stack that keeps promises on bad days. When he walks the aisles at night, dodging pallet jacks and the last engineer's rolling chair, he feels relief more than loss. No is heavy for a week, and then it is light for a decade. Teams return to work that is theirs. Racks hum the same key they were humming before. The platform remains a place where other people store confidence. Meanwhile, the world's appetite sharpens. Training jobs that once looked large now look like warm-ups. Checkpoints balloon. Data sets arrive by truck. The graphs on whiteboards tilt up and right until someone jokes that gravity is broken. Gravity is not broken. Infrastructure is catching up. He reminds rooms that drama is optional. The right answer is the one that lets you breathe in November. So they keep adding lanes, but paint each lane before opening it. New envy this, new switch that, new link or bus with numbers you can memorize and then forget. Because the real question is whether the job finishes before the day turns into something else. At scale, failure semantics become worth more than success stories. Anyone can demo a perfect day. He prefers predictable bad days. If a card goes quiet, what loses work? If a switch reboots, who waits and who continues? If a file system sulks, does the training curve plateau and hold or faceplant and ghost? The platform learns to bend under weight instead of break under insult. Customers notice. They do not tweet about it. They renew. He refines the two-sentence speech for this era. For executives, we give you highways where your trucks actually make it to the other side. For engineers, here are the fabrics, the collectives, and the schedulers. Here is where contention lives. Here are the 3 knobs we hid and the 2 we left because you will need them on Thursday. The trick, as always, is that both sentences must be the same truth at different altitudes. The company has no patience for clever divergence. On the product floor, he watches teams who no longer think in single boxes. They think in constellations. A box is a star. A row is a cluster. A building is a sky. They draw heat maps that look like weather and treat them with the same healthy respect. They measure east-west flows like traffic engineers. They stare at topologies until a shorter path appears. They write runbooks that begin with, "If you are reading this, the room is loud. Here is the quiet way through." They put names to noises. A hiss becomes a mislabeled lane. A click becomes a power rail that needs a kinder slope. The names help. Problems shrink when they can be called. He keeps humans in the diagram on purpose. A platform that forgets the operators ends up with genius in the chip and chaos in the aisle. He sits with people who pull boxes with bad wheels and asks them to edit the spec. He sits with people who page in at 4 a.m. with calm voices and asks what would make the 4 a.m. shorter. He sits with researchers who know exactly when a crash will feel like personal failure and asks how to make the crash clinical instead. They teach him small things that save weeks: label fonts, finger clearances, the location of a vent relative to a face. In meetings, someone will ask, because it is their job to ask, "How do we stay ahead?" He answers with the same humility that brought them here, by serving Tuesday better than anyone else. Tuesday is the day after the launch, the day when you plug a box into a network with scars and you try to do work with people who did not attend the keynote. Tuesday is where arrogance explodes. It is also where platforms are crowned. He suggests they cut a cake every time a Tuesday goes by without a surprise. No one orders the cake. They edit a run book instead and smile. The language they put into the world in the last chapter, an ordinary way to talk to many hands, keeps growing muscles. Now those muscles must coordinate across aisles. Collectives become conversations that do not lose their place. Schedulers stop stepping on the toes of storage. Profilers learn manners and context, blaming network when network is guilty, and compute when compute is lazy. The culture of apology without perfume spreads into tools. When a dialogue says network is slower than it should be, it also says, we suspect queuing here. Try this. If it helps, here is the knob to keep. He writes a private checklist for big bet hygiene and slips it into his notebook. Will this reduce Tuesday pain for people we have not met? Can we teach it at 2 altitudes without lying? Does it make rooms humming with other people's deadlines calmer? If it fails, can it fail politely? If we succeed, do we become more ourselves? When a bet meets the list, he leans in with the weight of a person who has stayed late his whole career. When it does not, he practices the sentence leaders hate and organizations love. No, because fit. He explains fit in plain speech. He takes the heat. He empties it of drama. Teams walk back to work that is real. Highways keep carrying honest trucks. There are days when headlines invent a new noun, and the world demands that he have a position within the hour. He resists the hourly voice. He speaks in quarters and years, because that is the tempo of infrastructure. The rooms remember his tempo better than the timelines do. They remember that jobs finished, that when something broke, it broke politely, that the highways looked like highways, not like plans drawn by a clever intern and blessed by a bold tweet. When visitors ask to see the magic, he shows them the maintenance, the lint roller, the torque wrench with a gentle click, the labeler with spare tape, the spreadsheet that lists which firmware goes with which driver goes with which blessed container, the run book with fingerprints on the margin, the wall with 4 emails printed and taped up. Shipped, slept, stable, thank you. If they still want magic after that, he points to the racks and says, listen. The sound is an honest hum. On a late night, he walks past a whiteboard where someone has drawn a city in chalk. Boxes as buildings, switches as intersections, links as avenues. A scribble in the corner reads, make the green lights longer. He smiles because the note is both a joke and the job. Longer green lights, fewer red lights that pretend to be yellow. A flow that lets ideas cross town without losing their temperature. He leaves the aisle and steps into outside air that smells faintly like warm dust and rain trying to begin. Trucks idle by a loading dock. Somewhere inside, another training curve is rising and flattening in a shape that tells a team it did not waste a season. That curve owes as much to wires and handshakes and knows as it does to any chip. The story is not just about power. It is about passage and prudence, the highways that carried the work, and the discipline that kept the road true when the map was tempting. Tomorrow the ask will be bigger. The answer will be the same shape. Feed the chips. Honor Tuesday. Own the behavior. Keep the promises warm when the room is cold. Say yes fast when fit is true. Say no gently when fit is false. Paint the lines. Sweep the floor. Shorten the sigh. Let the trucks through. The graph on the wall starts to look like a hill you could ski. Curves rise, flatten, rise again. Orders stack like pallets. Aisles hum. Headlines learn a new cadence. Chips, rooms, clusters, training runs that feel like weather systems. People who never said the word GPU before are saying it into microphones with the gravity of mayors declaring a holiday. Inside the building, the temperature does not change. Fans keep their key. Engineers keep their checklists. The ritual on Fridays still honors the second email. The story outside grows loud. The work inside stays polite to Tuesday. He steps to the podium more often now, And the jacket becomes a uniform the way a pilot's shirt is a uniform. Reassurance, not costume. He does not chase clever lines. He carries 2 sentences that the company has practiced for years. To the rooms that buy, we sell less waiting. To the rooms that build, here are the parts that agree to behave. Here are the knobs that matter. Here is how to know when you guessed wrong without losing a week. The lights are brighter, the halls are larger, the applause lasts longer. The cadence stays small. Explain, ship, help. The surge does not feel like a miracle from inside. It feels like compound interest on boring excellence. A decade of drivers that didn't strand, examples that didn't lie, support that answered at 1:14 a.m., racks that breathed as one, corridors that didn't gossip when traffic got heavy. Now those habits meet an appetite that finally matches them. Models want more hands. Datasets want wider doors. Rooms want predictable mercy when something fails. The platform is ready because it was built for bad days as much as good ones. He carries a notebook with fewer diagrams and more lists. Lists of promises the company is not allowed to break under any circumstance. Uptime is a tone, not a number. The tone must be calm. Drivers and docks ship together, errors confess. Tuesday gets shorter every quarter. Big launches never arrive with small surprises. Those sentences look plain on paper. They become rails when budgets pinch and headlines tempt. The rails keep the train from wandering into drama. The market tries to translate the surge into temperature, hot, hotter, hottest. He declines those adjectives. He prefers stewardship, a colder word with a warmer heart. Stewardship is the long posture of keeping a place safe for work. The podium is part of that posture, but most of stewardship has no audience. It happens when a product review says, "We will not ship this until the installer stops causing anxiety." It happens when a partner asks for a clever exception, and the answer is no. Discipline saves more Fridays. It happens when a senior engineer rewrites an error message at midnight and sleeps better because strangers will too. The surge years bring new frictions with their gifts: power, heat, floor space, supply chains that behave like seas, software stacks swollen by good intentions, research cycles that sprint for cliffs because the valley behind them is crowded. He treats each friction as a design brief. Power becomes efficiency work in silicon and policy work in rooms. Cap where you can, plan where you must, account for reality instead of trying to charm it. Heat becomes an airflow and site selection problem that asks kindness of buildings, not just boxes. Supply becomes an honest calendar. Tell customers the truth early so their Tuesday can adapt. He asks the rooms to respect limits as if they were colleagues. Physics is a colleague. Time is a colleague. Scarcity is a colleague with a bad temper. Treat them with good manners. Do not boast that you will beat them. Invite them onto the plan. Make diagrams that assume they will sit at the table. The rooms nod because they have all watched schedules break under promises made to impress a week and collect pain for a year. On stage, he talks about systems with the joy of a carpenter describing a house that finally gets light the way it was sketched. Boxes, links, fabrics, stacks, runbooks, and a city's worth of small agreements that make a large yes. Off stage, he repeats the old sentence to the young: own nouns by reducing Tuesday pain. If they want to own words like platform, inference, acceleration, they must accept the old chores. Fix the README, move the knob, rewrite the log, paint the lines, sweep the floor. There is a new habit in these years: teaching at scale, not in fireworks, but in a library of short, forgiving lessons that start where people really are. The team produces examples that welcome non-specialists without making specialists roll their eyes. They post first-hour recipes that do not break in the second hour. They gather professors, operators, startups, studios, labs into a neighborhood where patterns travel faster than confusion. 1,000 small acts of translation, between altitudes, between domains, between the way a research paper speaks and the way a run book must, shorten a million Tuesdays. He guards the company's voice. Pride is allowed. Swagger is not. Swagger inflames calendars. Pride carried quietly, on behalf of teams that keep their promises when rooms are cold, strengthens the floor. He tells story fragments that read like receipts. A studio that sent one fewer pizza because the render farm did not wheeze. A lab that moved a deadline forward because the model converged while the data was fresh. A hospital pilot that did not need a hero because the system behaved like it was built by adults. He will not say miracle. He will say maintenance. New product names arrive like lanes added to a bridge that already carries trucks. They are not decorations. They are agreements about throughput, reliability, grace under insult. Each generation promises more hands, heavier lifts, kinder power profiles, better nerves between chips. Each is graded internally by a question that does not change with the decade. Did the Tuesday curve bend? If not, the scoreboard on the outside is a distraction. If yes, rooms will stay even when the scoreboard blinks. He spends time with operators who wear fatigue like a credential and carry an affection for quiet. They teach him little things that save weeks, where a label should go, which latch is unfriendly to gloves, how a fan's pitch tells you its mood, where a default should be humble rather than impressive. He invites them into specs, into docs, into launches before the press learns the name. He gives them the respect his younger self gave to the janitor who taught him the locker trick. The uncelebrated experts keep companies honest. He also spends time with researchers who treat curiosity as a job and boredom as a tax. They ask for room to try 3 ideas at once without tripping over cables or licensing or missing drivers. He asks them for plain feedback. What is the part you curse that we could make silent? The answers are never poetic. They are paths. He brings those paths home and lays them into the platform until the curse words retire. When growth makes companies sloppy, the slop shows in the edges. The cheap email that replaces a conversation, the late change that replaces an apology, the tricky slide that replaces a hard truth. He names those temptations out loud so people do not have to pretend they don't exist. Then he offers a counterweight, fit. Fit with the culture of less waiting. Fit with the stack's honesty. Fit with the neighborhoods of users whose calendars are already fragile. If an idea does not fit, it is not shamed, it is parked. Parked ideas do not die. They mature, or they confirm they were wrong. Calm is a form of intelligence. He learns a new discipline as attention grows, not letting the room borrow tomorrow's trust to light today's headline. Trust is the battery that runs the platform. It is charged by behavior on boring days. It is drained by clever stunts. He tells teams to be stingy with the battery. Save it for outages, surprises, and the big winter when supply thins and patience withers. They listen because they have lived seasons and seen what happens when you spend trust like a bonus. Publicly, he describes roadmap in corridors, not cliffs. People can walk corridors. They can prepare for turns. They can forgive a door that opens 1 quarter late if the hall is lit and the signs were honest. He avoids puzzles and prefers maps, where we are, where the lanes widen, where a detour would break fewer hearts. Analysts call it conservative. Operators call it helpful. He smiles at the second adjective and continues. Power becomes a moral, not just a metric. He talks about work per joule and means it. Chips must return more work for less heat. Rooms must move air like a civil right. Data centers must sit where the earth is willing to cool them without complaint. He encourages designs that waste kindness on the human who has to touch the box. His engineers draft budgets where the cheapest watt is the watt you never had to pull. He refuses to do penance in press releases. He prefers accounting done with real numbers and cooler aisles. He names risk without melodrama, risk of bigness, bureaucracy that pads the floor with so much process the feet forget how to feel, risk of worship, thinking the jacket is the story instead of the practice, risk of fashionable abstraction, hiding physics under a quilt of metaphors that developers cannot debug. He counters each risk with a habit, small teams with door codes, rituals that honor second emails, demos that survive fluorescent light, docs that speak as if the reader is smart and tired, because they are. The years collect proofs of method, a city-scale deployment that does not tremble when a link goes sour, a research effort that ships a paper because hardware, software, and teaching arrived as a complete sentence, a startup that avoids a hero culture because the platform made heroics optional. These proofs are boring, and he is proud of that. Boring is the weather of a civilization that is working. The jacket catches lights. The proofs pay rent. He thinks more often about succession in the practical, not ceremonial sense. Stewardship must be teachable. The playbook must be portable. He insists that posture, show up, explain, ship, help, live in people who do not share his name. He watches presentations where others carry the cadence clean. He listens to Q&A where others answer with sentences that begin we and end in Tuesday. He leaves rooms early on purpose so others can complete the arc without him as a fulcrum. Leadership is not a podium. Leadership is reproducible behavior. In one keynote near the end of a long roadshow, he sets a slide with 3 lines and lets them sit longer than slides like to sit. Make big rooms feel like one machine. Teach ordinary people to use many hands. Shorten the distance from hope to done. He does not name architectures or code names or speeds in that moment. Everyone in the room knows those numbers by heart. He names the work under the numbers. He wants the audience to recognize the pattern so they can hold the company accountable without being distracted by costumes. He steps away from the stage and walks the demo floor the way he walked labs years ago. He stops where the tired people are. A researcher who hasn't found a bug but senses one, an operator who can tell when a heat map is lying, a student who learned more from a helpful error than from a perfect run. He thanks them without confetti. He knows who keeps the platform honest. It is not the headline. It is the friction tellers. When companies become symbols, they are tempted to index their day to people who watch symbols. He keeps the company indexed to the people who ship by Friday. That index resists volatility and punishes theater. Some weeks it leaves applause on the table. In return, it leaves fewer broken rooms behind. He takes that trade every time. Quiet loyalty outlives loud enthusiasm. Late one night, he returns to the office and walks a floor that is dimmed to cleaning lights. Someone has left a small museum on a side table again, a misprinted board, a burned connector, a screenshot of a confessional error, a photo of a neat rack with a caption that reads, "It stayed boring." He adds a post-it with 4 words, "Keep the floor true," and leaves it there for a junior engineer to find when the elevator opens at 8. He thinks of the boy who moved across countries and lockers, who learned that attention is a kindness you can apply to rooms until they calm. He thinks of the diner booth where a napkin held a plan that still holds. He thinks of Riva, the first relief, and the day someone wrote GPU in a box on a whiteboard and nobody laughed. He thinks of the sticky note that said, "Teach the chip English," and the morning the first student wrote back, "It ran." He thinks of rooms that hum, of wires that behave, of no said without bitterness, and yes said with the weight of a decade behind it. Tomorrow will bring a new adjective for big, a new way to ask for hands, a new place that wants a room that works. The podium will feel the same. The jacket will feel the same. The trains will run on the same rails. Be early to the hard thing and stay late. Reduce Tuesday pain for people you haven't met yet. Protect the second email from neglect. Treat the unowned space like your job. Keep nouns honest by behaving like the person who earned them. He turns off a lamp and stands for a moment in the doorway of a room that looks like any other when it is empty. Chairs, whiteboard ghosts, a coil of cable waiting for a hand. The quiet is complete enough to hear civilization's small machines, the refrigerator 2 floors away, the elevator resting, the city's lights touching the windows. He allows himself one private sentence before he leaves, not as a boast, but as a calibration. We kept it boring. In this building, boring is a prayer and a plan. Outside, night air folds around him with the same neutral mercy it has always offered. Somewhere a training curve is climbing and flattening, and someone will sleep better for it. Somewhere a render queue is not sighing. Somewhere a student will turn in a paper because the kernel ran when it needed to. None of those people will thank a jacket. They will thank ease, clarity, and rooms that work. He can live with that. He built for that. Hey, thanks for staying until the end. You just walked through the long road of a person who kept his promises steady even when the lights got bright. Jensen Huang's story isn't about noise. It's about patience, repetition, and people who make rooms work when the rest of the world's asleep. If this one kept you company tonight, wait till it ends before you subscribe. Then tap the bell so the next quiet file finds you. Drop your city, local time, and what you're listening on in the comments so our night map keeps growing. And tell me what part of this story stayed with you.